But today, Alan Tudge also came out and I thought put a slightly different take on what I understood was happening last week. He said there's going to be no guarantee for Australian residency for Hong Kong visa holders. Now, these are the people that are already in the country, of course, who can have their visas extended for up to 5 years, plus those who are fleeing for political persecution or claiming asylum of some description in Hong Kong to apply for a visa to come out here. Now, is this an about-face by the government, Jim Molan, or is this consistent with what was released last week?
I certainly got the impression that the 5 years that we were going to give them would be a pathway to citizenship, but maybe this is just a refinery of a misconception that I had. And, humanitarian visas exist for humanitarian purposes, and this could be considered a humanitarian purpose. But I would be disappointed if it went over the levels of migration that we have in this country now. By all means, use humanitarian visas, but the total should be subtracted from the permanent residency, 160,000 per year, or other other decisions that we've made as we have in the past, so that we don't put more stress on our cities, we don't put more stress on our infrastructure, and whilst we're trying to help these good people.
And one of the other important announcements that was made, of course, was the Prime Minister said there was going to be some changes to our extradition law. Here he is. I think we've got the package now.
Our government, together with other governments around the world, have been very consistent in expressing our concerns about the imposition of the national security law. Australia is adjusting its laws, our sovereign laws, our sovereign immigration program, things that we have responsibility for and jurisdiction over, to reflect the changes that we're seeing take place there.
Now, Raf, you weren't in the Parliament when I teamed up with your party and, most extraordinarily, the Greens and others to stop the Turnbull government from ratifying an extradition treaty with mainland China. What's your view on the Prime Minister's decision to stop extraditions to Hong Kong?
Well, I think the decision that's been taken by the Australian government is a good one. The Labor Party had been calling for this for a little while. I've certainly been quite vocal and gave a speech in the Senate back in June about Australia having the need for Australia to diversify its trade away from China, but also around the world, and being a bit more strategic about our interactions. What I think here is that there is some options that the government has been considering for some time, I'd imagine, and been monitoring the situation over in Hong Kong. It's important that we do look at this on a more regular basis. I think the events that are unfolding there are quite concerning, in my opinion. And Australia has a very proud record when it comes to human rights as well. So I think we should do all we can to make sure that the people of Hong Kong and those that are currently living here in Australia basically receive I guess the freedoms and any support they need in these difficult times at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. There are lots of students here in Australia, lots of temporary and skilled workers. Renee, you do a lot of work on campuses around the country. The freedom movement amongst the Hong Kong Chinese that are out here studying, do you find that, is it a powerful influence? Are they coerced or intimidated by other Chinese students? What's your take on this?
Well, it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. This has been a particularly passionate issue for most students. And I think that the Scott Morrison government, if they do act bravely and if they do bring in these people from Hong Kong who have been fighting for democracy, who I believe will make a great Australian citizens, they will win a lot of young votes if they do this. However, we have seen incidences on campus of international students fighting back and being quite protective of the lines coming out of the Chinese government, and that is also concerning. But that just goes back to the free speech crisis that has been going on Australian campuses for a very long time, and it's about time we did something about it.
Well, you're quite right about that. We could have an entire show devoted to what's going on campuses around the country.